Welcome to Miss V, the Storyteller podcast. You know I bring you the very best, and or God sends the very best. And I am so excited to have Dana on our show. She is a jewel. Yes, she has been through a lot in her life, but the good thing is God has brought her out and she has a message to share. And I love when guests they are not ashamed to share their story. They're not ashamed to help other people. And that is what Dana's going to do for us today. So, with all of that said, Dana is going to introduce herself to us and then we're going to dive right in. So, Dana, go ahead and introduce yourself to my guest. My listeners.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. This is Dana Diaz. I am an author of a book that was just released. I wrote a book about my previous relationship, 25 years that I endured. And that was after a childhood where I was raised by a narcissistic stepfather and a mother who excused and enabled the behavior. So I have a lot of things to share, but I feel like it's been put upon me the responsibility to get the message out and make people aware of what the potential consequences of the narcissistic abuse or any abuse, any kind of bullying, because as a result of 40 some years of this narcissism that I've been, put in the situations to experience, I actually became ill. My body, because it was in fight or flight mode for so long, and the stress hormones and all of this, the emotional trauma actually caused me to become autoimmune. And I also developed a lung disease. So I want to just let people know when I was in the situation that I was in, I thought I was alone. I thought my situation was unique. Nobody would believe me. So I kept to myself and I kept everything quiet. And I was certainly quieted by the abusers. But I think it's really important for somebody to finally speak out, which is why I'm on this mission to just make people aware of the very serious consequences of narcissistic abuse and what can happen if you stay in the situations. I realize it's not always possible or safe to leave, but it's really important for people to at least know what another person's experience is with it so that they can assess their own situation and decide what they really want to do with their life and if it's something that they should really, think a little bit more about.
Well, I am so glad. I'm sorry that that happened to you, but I am so glad that you made it through to the other side. And not only that, you want to help other people. And that is so key when we go through things in our lives that we take the opportunity to help someone else out. And of course, I'm a storyteller. I love stories. I believe stories connect us and bring us together. So, Dana is going to share a story with us about something that happened to her, and I want you to listen to the story and I want you to listen to the decisions that she made in the story. So, Dana, go ahead and share your story with us.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, the story that I chose, just to give a little background, is actually a result of a lot of people saying, well, if it was so bad, why did you stay so long? Or, people assuming that something actually happened or something was said to cause me, the emotional upset or the trauma that I might have. But sometimes it wasn't the words, or it could just be the situation itself. So that's why I chose this story. So this actually was during COVID, back in 2020. We had just come out of the shelter in place. There were still restrictions, but our work schedules and my son's school schedule were still a little off, little less work than what we normally would be away from the house for. So instead of working the very long hours I normally worked because I just didn't want to be in the house, I had shorter days. So it was early afternoon, I'd say 1 or 2 o'clock, sun's shining, beautiful day, probably mid-June or so. My ex-husband, we were still legally married at the time, but he had opted to move out of our house. Now we lived on a little farm, about 4 acres, and there was a main house that my son and I still lived in. And my ex-husband chose to move into what we called the little house, which the former owners had built a little house for their in-laws. So that's where my ex-husband was staying. My son it was really important to him for both his mom and dad. Even if we weren't going to be together as a couple, he wanted his mom and dad at least on the same property. And we agreed, even though I was hesitant because there had been some violence and threats, and I did not feel safe and I did not feel comfortable, but I agreed to it as we were going through the process of divorcing. So on this really beautiful sunny, summer afternoon, I got home and nobody was there. Nobody's cars were there. So it was very quiet. Went in the house, put the mail on the kitchen counter, got something to drink, just normal things. And I was just rifling through the mail, seeing what came in, leaned back against the kitchen counter, took a sip of my drink. And I heard we had a long gravel driveway, 200 some feet, and I heard the gravel crunching. And so I turned and looked out the window, and it was my ex-husband barreling up the driveway full speed, which annoyed me because we had farm cats, we had cows, pigs, chickens, you never know what was going to be crossing the driveway. And I'm thinking, he was very erratic that way. He was one of these people that if he felt a certain way, everybody was going to know about it. So he comes bare driveway, gravel's flying. I could see dust in the air, but I ignored it. My heart was, pacing really fast. And I tend, when I get fearful like that, and just the sight of his vehicle would make me just clench up. My shoulders would stiffen. I'd hold my breath. I'd close my eyes sometimes, but I had to consciously say, okay, it's fine. He lives in the other house now. Whatever his mood is, he can go be that way over there. Well, see, I'm holding my breath now just thinking about it. So I just continued rifling through the mail, trying to just do a normal thing to distract myself back into a normal state physically. And all of a sudden, the door, it wasn't a front door. We had glass French door on the side of the house, and that's where we would enter and exit the house. It flew open, bounced against the wall behind it, and it was my ex-husband, who had no right to be in the house because he didn't live there anymore. But he came in, did not look at me, did not say anything. And again, I am just, everything in me, every fiber of my being was terrified. So it's like I paralyzed myself. It's like I always said I felt like a rabbit. Like if I stilled myself, didn't move, didn't breathe, maybe I won't be seen.
Yeah.
So there I was in this paralyzed state, and he came through the kitchen, went up the stairs, and the only thing upstairs was the master bedroom, master bathroom, and a loft office that I had. And I heard his footsteps pounding down the stairs, not even 30 seconds later, and he was carrying a handgun.
No.
And he walked out of the house, slammed the door so hard behind him that, pictures on the wall, things shook. He slammed the door so hard. And there I am still, probably it felt like a few minutes. Maybe it wasn't even a minute, but for me, it felt like forever. And I couldn't even breathe. I couldn't even release a breath because I knew that he had made that point. I don't believe that when he took all his things, when he moved out, that he didn't remember he had a handgun up in his bedroom closet. He knew he had that handgun there. And I knew in that second, in that instance, that he had purposely left it there to wait for an opportunity to make sure that he could keep me in line. I always said, he did things like that to, like, it felt like a shock collar you'd put on a dog to keep me in line and make sure I knew my place, because that was just to intimidate me and to make sure that I knew that he now had that gun. After all the threats and all the things, he had said he would do, or it was just so terrifying. Obviously, when I finally, was able to move and telling myself, oh, okay, it's okay, let's just take action. I locked the door, dead bolted the door. My son was not home, but I could not risk my ex coming in. Now, the other part of that, somebody might say, well, how did he know that you had just gotten home? Well, when he had moved out of the main house, he went and got himself a Ring doorbell. And those Ring doorbells have the
Oh,
camera and that
yes.
you get the notification. He put a Ring doorbell on my front door, my house.
Oh
So
my
he would
God.
monitor my comings and goings. He would monitor our son's comings and goings. Sometimes we'd get text messages like, oh, well, I thought you were just going to the store and you must
Oh my
have met
God.
somebody at the store. Or what were you doing? Did you meet somebody at church because you were gone a little longer than you should have been? So he knew I had just come home, and he made a point of coming in when he knew I
Mm.
was there alone without my son to make sure to terrify me. No words were spoken, nothing happened per se, but that gives somebody an idea of what narcissistic abuse is. Nothing has to happen and nothing has to be said for somebody to keep you in line, to control you, to manipulate your behavior, because you will submit when you
Mhm.
think that somebody might actually use that gun. And in our life together, he laid on the couch a lot and watched TV. He did a lot of laying around on the couch and watching TV. And he had a switchblade that he kept in the little drawer right there in the coffee table, right next to where he'd always have a drink. And that was always what I also referred to as kind of having a shot collar, because I
Mhm.
knew that knife was there and I'm terrified of knives, and he knows that. And so that's my story.
Wow.
It's not so much exciting. Like I said, nothing happened. And if anyone would ask, why are you acting like that? Or why do you feel this way? He didn't do anything. No, he didn't. Not that day, but he made sure that I knew that he could.
No,
And
he
that's
did do
abusive.
something. No, he did do something. And, for people who say that, apparently they've never gone through anything. Now, I've never gone through something like that, but I know exactly how you feel when someone intimidates you to the point where you feel so small, or you try to make yourself so small just to make them go away and not to verbally abuse you or put their hands on you or anything. I know because I was not a talker. I lost my voice, and I internalized everything. And it got to the point in my life where I could blame myself for everything. If anything went wrong, it was my fault. And because I internalized
Yes.
everything, I started to have health issues. And it took me a long time to connect the two. And I remember one time I was at home, and I had allowed a family member to come and move in with me. And the family member had a temper problem. And the entire family was invited for an event of another family member, and that particular family member asked me if I would MC for him, and I was like, "Sure, I'll do it for you." So I had to get dressed and be ready early. So I'm trying to get ready, and this particular person is holding my bathroom hostage. And I'm like, I need to get in there. I need to take a shower because I have to be there early. You can go downstairs and finish doing what you need to do, until I finish, and then you can hop in the shower because it's two bathrooms, For what you're going to do, it can be done downstairs. The only thing you need upstairs is the shower, and I can just get in, pop in and out.
Right.
And that person got angry with me and was just coming at me. And just like you said, my entire insides, my stomach, the anxiety and everything. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God, if he puts his hands on me, And so I'm like standing there, and I'm like, okay. And just shouting and yelling and screaming and all that. And I found the power or strength or whatever, and I said, no. And I spoke up for myself. And those are one of the few times that I actually spoke up for myself. But at this time, I was an adult. I spoke up for myself.
Mhm.
I picked up the phone. I made a phone call. I told the other person on the other line what was going on. That person was like, put him on the phone. Let me talk to him. And I was like, nope, he can't use my phone. What he can do is just leave my house, period. I am done. I will no longer walk around my house being in fear. You cannot, and you are
Yes.
not in, you are not welcome here anymore because this is my house and you cannot. And if you don't leave, the next phone call will be the police. And that's exactly what I said. And within minutes, the person was gone. But I am so grateful at that moment that I didn't shrink like I've done in the past. Because in the past, I call myself a runner. I would just run. I would bolt. I would
Yes.
just get out. I would leave. I call myself the runner. If it's a
Yep.
sign, a sniff, a smell of trouble, I'm out. I am like gone.
That's what
It's
I
not
have
that
said the
true. It's like
same
as soon
thing.
as you
It
just
is
sniff it,
absolutely
it's
true.
like, whoo, I gotta go. No, I'm not dealing with this
Yes.
today. I'm getting my car or whatever. And that
Yeah.
had always been my past. But that particular day, I think I needed to stand up, and I think I needed to show myself that you are strong, that you do not have to put up with this. I'm not saying that I didn't have other times when something happened to me and I wanted to shrink and feel small. But at that particular time, I did stand up for myself and I did speak up for myself,
Right.
but it took some more, I guess, of me going through for me to get it in my head that you never have to take it. Instead of picking and choosing, you never have to take this behavior. So, what
Right.
was there a particular day, incident, time, or something where you said, okay, been there, done that, I've had enough? Because I think we all get to a point
Yes.
in our lives when we say enough is enough. Everybody, I
Absolutely.
believe. Now there are some people that don't quite make it out, but I believe that that spirit or that something in them is there, but they may not be able to follow through it, but it's there.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's the ability to follow through because, going back to childhood with my stepfather, oh, I would tell him some words that he didn't like hearing out of my little young mouth, but I stood up for myself. I stood up for my mother at school when somebody was being pushed around. I was that girl. I stood up for everybody. I am not shy. I am not a little wallflower. I'll speak my mind and I have a strong will. So that's why it's so unusual. People can't understand why with my ex-husband, but I think it was just that fear and I wanted peace. You touched on, not feeling fearful in your home. I didn't even like being in our house. It was not a home. We were there 17 years and I have no feelings about that house. I just knew I dreaded going there every day after work. Like, oh, I got to go there. It was not a secure and safe place for me. So when did I draw the line? When did Dana finally come back and find her voice? It was with that same gun that I just told the story
Hmm.
about. This was now after our divorce. We were
Oh.
divorced. Okay. Same year, though, we were divorced. I could not get him to move off the property. He did not want the house. So my son was in his senior year of high school, and I promised him, finish out we're not going to add, moving and everything on top of your mom and dad got divorced and, everything else
Right.
going in COVID. It was a stressful year for him. So I just wanted some stability for my son. And, my ex said he would place, but he would not move off that property. So the house is in my name, titles in my name, deeds in my name, but my ex will not move out of that in-law house. So one night I come home and it was because my ex-husband sent me a very unpleasant text message.
Mm.
He must have caught wind that I was out with somebody that I've known for a very long time. It happens to be the man I am married to now. I had known him for several years. I'd actually known his family for 15 or 16 years at that point. So it wasn't just some random guy I picked up in a bar. I've known him for a very long time. But after the divorce, we realized we liked each other a little more than, just friends. And so I was out with him. Um, and it was probably mid to late October of 2020. So, it gets dark very early. It was pitch dark out at night. I'm out with who's now my husband, get a text message from my ex-husband that I'm not even going to repeat. But it was nasty. It was vile. There was sexual content. He put emojis with a middle finger and all kinds of stuff. And I just said, okay, I got to get to my house, because if my ex had also liked to drink a lot. And when he drank, nothing, my son and I kind of had a code. We'd give each other a look or say, oh, it's going to be one of those nights. That was kind of our code. But I thought, if it's going to be one of those nights, I don't need my kid at home dealing with this alone. So I had to go back home and be a mom, and make sure to protect my kid from whatever was going on. So I race home. And I get there, and my son is with some of his friends in the garage. My son's actually a diesel mechanic now, so he has always liked to tinker with cars, and they do LED lights and stereo equipment in their trucks.
Wow.
Teenage boys like all that. So they're in the garage doing all that, and everything seemed normal. His friends, oh, hey, how are you? And one of them comes over and gives me a hug. And, here my heart had been racing. I was coming home. I was going to give this man a fight for, we're divorced. He doesn't get to tell me, anything anymore. I was going to give it right back to him, but I had to calm down and act like everything was okay, which I often had to do with my son. I had to turn off my inclination to go at my ex. So, okay, everybody's good. And I'm looking around. I see the little in-law house there, completely dark. Usually I could tell if my ex-husband was awake or home because, well, his vehicle would be there, which it was. So I knew he was there. But up in his window, I usually saw that like bluish glow of a TV being on, and it wasn't on. It was pitch black in that house. So I'm thinking, I fell for it. He baited me. He knew that he knew how to push my buttons after 25 years. He'd sent me that text knowing I was going to race home, knowing he was ruining my little date night out. And, I think he wanted me to come in hot, come in frazzled, so that the kids would think, I'm crazy, just like he always was telling people to discredit me. But I wasn't. I kept my cool, and I just said, okay, well, good. I'm glad I don't have to fight with him. So, it was probably about 10:30 at night now. So I went in the house. I figure, okay, my son's fine. He's with his friends. If the ex-husband, maybe he's passed out drunk, hopefully it'll be quiet for the night. I'm going to go in. I made myself a little tomato soup because it was chilly out. I thought I'll warm myself up a little bit, get my pajamas on, and I'm just going to go to bed myself. Well, I'm drinking my little tomato soup out of a little coffee cup, a little teacup actually. And my son comes in and he says, if you don't mind, I'm going to go sleep over at my friend's house. And I said, I don't mind at all. I was actually thrilled for him, despite, what had happened with his dad texting me. But my son had not left the house to go anywhere with anybody all the while that the divorce and COVID.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I feel like it was in a protective way for me that he didn't want me to be there alone. And I tried not to be there if I could help it, because I didn't want the interaction between me and my ex-husband. But so I was excited. I'm like, this is good. He needs to go be with his friends. And I'm not going to lie, I was terrified because I thought, oh, I don't want to be in this house alone if anything does happen. And I did not trust my ex-husband for many reasons. But I knew I knew even a month into my relationship with him, he had a violent, nature. He was a very angry person. So my son leaves, goes with his friend, and I lock the deadbolt lock, all the locks turn out, all the lights in the house. I'm thinking, okay, I look over. I wanted to make sure my ex's little house was still completely dark, no TV, no movement. I mean, it was dark. Okay. And mind you, you have to remember we lived in more of a rural area.
Hmm.
So when I say it's pitch black, there are no street lights, there are no, there are a couple houses nearby, but in the distance. So I mean, it is pitch black. Okay. So I go up the stairs. I go in my bedroom. Um, I had gotten into the habit because I didn't trust my ex-husband. And since the day he had taken the gun out and terrified me, making a show of it, I I felt so silly, but it made me feel better. I would move this big king size bed with a headboard and footboard and everything every night when I would move it towards the middle of the room away from the windows, because there were 5 windows on 3 walls of the bedroom had windows,
Oh my.
and 2 of the windows I sound paranoid, but again, you have to understand that this
Right.
man, I did not trust him.
Yeah.
2 of the windows kind of they faced 2 of the windows in the upstairs of the little house. And in my mind, I thought,
Hmm.
okay,
Hmm.
if I had a gun and I wanted somebody dead, like he knew what side of the bed I slept on and he knew what side I laid on after 25 years, somebody. So I'm like, I was so afraid since that day he took the gun that he was going to shoot me from that house. So I pull the bed away from the windows more towards the center of the room. And then I even went so far as to sleep with my head at the footboard and my feet at the headboard,
Oh
because I
man.
thought, okay, well, if he did shoot in, my logic was I'd rather be shot in the foot or the leg than in the head and die. I mean, again, it sounds so paranoid and I felt crazy
No,
doing all this,
it doesn't,
but
because
this
we tell us.
man, yeah, but he had threatened me. I was getting text messages, emails. He even had, in the midst of all this, before this night, had even sent me an email saying this would be easier if one of us was dead. So
Oh my.
it just made me feel better. So I go through all this, this new routine of trying to relax and go to bed. So I pull the bed out, I lay in the, with my head at the footboard, feet at the headboard, under the ceiling fan, away from the windows. And I pull the covers over my head and I'm trying to it's hard to relax after all that
Hmm.
when you know the reason for it, but I'm trying to relax, close my eyes. And I would always pray every night. Um, I always pray to the Virgin Mary. I do a few Hail Marys. That's my thing. I think I had too many confessionals when I was growing up Catholic that I know my Hail Marys, but I did some Hail Marys. And it's strange because every once in a while I would pray specifically to my father-in-law, my ex-husband's father. He had passed away many years before, but I absolutely adored that man. And I'm positive he adored me just the same. We had a beautiful relationship.
Hmm.
So on this particular night, I don't know why I just felt, I remember praying to, I'm getting chills now just thinking of it. I prayed to my father-in-law. I said, please protect me and bring peace in my home. Just a simple request, please protect me, bring peace in my home. And I kept saying it over and over, told him I loved him. And then I closed my eyes. I didn't have my eyes closed more than maybe a minute or two. And I heard my ex-husband outside my bedroom window in the back of the house, and he's screaming all kinds of profanities, just asking me, well, I'm not even going to say what he was yelling. He was just calling me a whore because, again, he had caught wind that I was, dating somebody that we knew, and just being very disgusting and vile what he was screaming. So I'm just like, just ignore it, because there's nothing you can. I always say you can't reason with the unreasonable. There's
Hmm.
no point. There's
That's
no
true.
point. So I just left it alone and I'm closing my eyes, just please be done, please be done. And I even pulled another big comforter over my head thinking, I don't even want to hear the words, because even if you try to let it go, it still affects you. And I was just tired of hurting. So it went on probably 10 or 15 minutes. And then it got quiet. And I thought, thank goodness he's relieved me. Well, no, he didn't, because the next thing I knew, he was shooting the gun off. He shot it off at least 3 times that I can actually remember.
Oh my
I
God.
don't, and I literally don't, I could not tell you how I got from the
Mhm.
bed into a corner of the room away from all the windows, and I'm on the phone with 911. And I am, as you can imagine, sobbing and hysterical because the location we lived at, more rural location, even though there were towns, 5, 6, 7 miles away, we were in an unincorporated area where the county cops had jurisdiction, and the county cops were 45 minutes away.
Oh my.
And this man was right outside my bedroom shooting a gun. So, and it was that same gun that he had taken that one night. So the thing about this story, and I will give a little bit beyond that, but that was my final calling. 911 was my final, I'm not taking this anymore, because prior to that, my son had begged me, don't call the cops, don't involve the cops, don't go to the
Oh,
authorities.
okay.
And I would sometimes tell him, yeah, but this is very serious. When your dad swings a crowbar at your mother's head, and I mean, thank God I ducked. That's violent. That's domestic violence. But mom, I don't want to be the kid that has a dad that goes to jail. Well, honey, your dad's already been
Oh,
in jail before,
yeah.
and it's like, I didn't want to involve my son or affect him anymore. You just don't want your kids to
Right.
go through that. So
Yeah.
I had not for all the things my ex-husband had done, I had not called the cops. But when that gun went off that night, I said, and forgive me, F this. Obviously, I went from that bed to the corner of the room. I don't even remember dialing 911, but that was it. And I will tell you, I had 2 county cops and 2 cops from each town near us. So 6 cops at my house, and they would not take him away. I showed them proof that I
Oh,
was the only owner of that house. My name was the only one in the title and the deed. I showed them the divorce papers, giving me the house and giving me full custody of my son and everything. And they would not take him away. They said that, yes, he's obviously intoxicated, but we have no good reason. I said, what about him shooting a gun off outside my bedroom? I showed them the emails. I showed them the text message from earlier that night. Well, yeah, obviously there's some tension and conflict, but unless, we have the shells or we have a video. And I remember looking at the cop, the one that was questioning me more so than the others. And I said, you cannot tell me in the 1950s or 19, heck, even in the 1980s, nobody had, what am I supposed to use my smartphone to video this man out my window shooting me? Is that the evidence you want? Because people didn't have that before. And domestic violence is not new. It has existed. So at some point, you have to believe the victim and take the abuser away. This man does not need to be on my property. And he does not need to be shooting a gun outside my bedroom window. Well, we can't take him away. We can't take him away. He has a record. He has been in jail before. He has had DUIs. He has had, I think there was something about theft from the past earlier in our marriage, which was a whole other thing. Give me a break. Give me a break. He should have been handcuffed and taken away. They would not take him. And I said, well, I'm not staying here. And they said, well, that's your option. And so I went, and an officer, they have to accompany me up to my bedroom, watched me pack a bag. And I said, I need to make sure that this man doesn't follow me or know where I'm going. And so they had 3 of the cops, one was ahead of me and 2 behind me, escort me out, followed me to where I went that night. but what a terrible situation to be in, because for all the friends and people, places I could have gone to, I was not going to go somewhere where I had lots of friends with children. I'm not going to put them in
Right.
danger. I
Yeah.
have elderly people that, were always very, parental or grandparent figures to me. I was not going to put them in any kind of danger. I had to be careful of where I went, but I had to be escorted by 3 police cars, and 3 stayed behind to make sure he didn't follow me. But he actually not, he stayed on my property for, I think he moved about 5 months after that. So in those 5 months, imagine how I felt. Imagine how I felt.
Wow. And there
So
was nothing that you could do, but that was your turning point. You
that
know,
was my turning point. And I went to the authorities that week. That happened on the Saturday. So it was Monday morning. I went to the courthouse and filed an order of protection.
good for you.
My son was livid, but I said, listen to me, you can be mad at me. You cannot talk to me the rest of your life, but this is my life. You weren't
Right.
here. And my son did not believe me, because his dad told him that it must have been somebody else shooting a gun. Your mom's crazy. And to this day, my son does not believe that his dad shot the gun. And by the way, when I when I needed to go to court for this order of protection, they said it would be good if I had witnesses. So I did contact my next door, well, if you call them next door neighbors, they were a few acres over, but the next house. And they said that in fact, and this is the worst part of it, they said, in fact, yes, she did come to court and help me get the order of protection. She said, yeah, we heard him yelling outside your house. And she said, I was watching from my upstairs window because I knew you were home. And she said, and we heard the gunshots. And she said, I was so worried.
Oh
She said,
my.
I told my husband to go and check on you, but he wouldn't. And I said, are you, we've been neighbors for 17
What?
years. She said, well, she says, I don't know if you remember when your husband shot our dog for running on the front part of your property. And I had not forgotten that my ex-husband had shot their dog in the
Oh
neck,
my
just
God.
for merely just passing, how sometimes dogs roam, just passing on the very front end of our property and minding its business, going home. My ex had shot their dog in the neck, and I had given them the money for the hospital bills, and the dog made it. So, and lived a very long life after. But this is the type of man I was married to. So the neighbor was actually, he didn't want to, he said he didn't trust my ex. And then,
He was afraid
so
too.
he was afraid too. So he was afraid to check on me because he was afraid for him, and he was afraid if he got involved. They had 4 small children. They didn't want any retaliation.
Yeah.
But the kicker of it all is she proceeds to tell me, she says, I was afraid he actually killed you that night, because she said he was over here not that long ago. She said we had some people over on a weekend having a bonfire, and we were drinking and having a good time, and he was actually sharing with everybody that he was planning on murdering you.
Oh my
And she said, we
God.
just kind of assumed that he was drunk and maybe just talking crap, and but she said, when we heard the gunshots, we thought, oh my God, he was serious.
Oh my God. Well,
So
I am
yeah,
so grateful
and
to
so
see
after
you.
this, yeah, it's been something. I mean, my heart's beating fast just thinking about it, but for people to understand that this is part of my mission too, is that this needs to be criminal. That man was allowed to live on my property for 5 months after that. And I did get an order of protection, by the way. I was denied an order of protection my first day in court, because the judge actually said to me she did not see that I had been in any danger.
I
So
have
I
heard
filed
this
a
before.
second
Yeah.
time. Yeah, I filed a second time, and that's when my neighbor came. Her husband begged her not to, because he did not want retaliation from my ex, but she said no. Somebody has to stand up for
Yes.
for
I,
me
I
and
like your
for
name.
the
Thank God
cause.
for
And she came,
her.
and oh, she's a strong one. She's a strong
Yeah.
one. And we're
Thank God
still
for
very good
her.
friends. But yes, thank God for her, because honestly, I don't think if she hadn't come to court, I don't think that I would have gotten the order of protection that I did. But the thing is that the order of protection I got, to give people some perspective, after all the things he'd done and all the things we'd shared in the court, and after this gun incident, my order of protection said that he could not be within 10 feet of me, 10 feet,
That's it?
but he could remain living on the property.
Oh my God, that is
Yes, ma'am.
crazy. So for anyone
So it
that's
was
out there,
basically useless.
yeah, but for anyone, because you're here now, you've remarried, you've gotten clear and totally free of him. But what advice would you have for someone who may be listening to your story and they're in it? What advice would you give them to help them to get out of it? I thank God, knock on wood, I've never been in a situation like that. I've been threatened, but I've never been in a situation where, to the extent that you have. Now, I would tell him in a heartbeat, you mess with me, I'm gonna call the police, I'm gonna call my brother, because my brother does not play when it comes to his sister. So what advice would you give someone, just what advice?
Working for 15 years on making a plan for my son and I to get out and still, be able to live, that set us up for that. But that was a long 15 years. But some people are in a more dire circumstance.
Hmm.
I have unfortunately met people that, the physical abuse or the sexual abuse is so, they're
Yeah.
in a really bad place, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can just pick up and walk out. And I had met a woman a few years ago that actually had to leave her 3 children behind, because it was either her or, she saves herself or she saves nobody. And she had to get out for her own safety and to live. Um, Everybody's situation is different. So I just tell people, your abuser best. You don't want to set them off, but at some point you have to choose yourself. You just have
Mm.
to. Um, we can tolerate a lot. People always say, "Oh, you're strong. You're strong." I never asked to be strong. I just wanted a loving
Not
husband.
especially not in that way.
No, that's not the strong that I wanted to be. So
Absolutely.
it's, for people who say, think that it's harder to leave. No, leaving is a lot easier than staying and enduring the things you have to go through. So I would just say, if it's safe and you can get out, that's the obvious advice. If it's not safe, you need to make police reports. I will say that
Mm.
in retrospect, the thing that kind of bit me in the butt at the end there was that there was no paper trail indicating,
Oh,
you know, is the abuse was going on. They showed up the one night and I'm telling them all this stuff and showing them all this stuff, but they're like, okay, we don't
right.
have anything though. I still think he should have been taken away in cuffs that night,
I agree.
but I was told, even with the order of protection, that the judge was so merciful. She just had, I don't think she had a soul, honestly, because she looked me right in the eye and said, well, and you're with him 25 years and all these things supposedly happened and you never filed
Okay.
a report. Obviously, she doesn't understand, if I would have filed anything or made a police complaint, um, if he would have found out. I mean, at one point, I was pretty sure for a couple of years there was a GPS on my car. I had to be very careful. So
Right.
again, if somebody can safely make reports to the authorities, you have to have a paper trail. But if nothing else, my biggest piece of advice is to keep your own record. I actually started a few years before the divorce, about 2 years before. And this was mostly because of the gaslighting. I was being told, I didn't say that. I never did that. You're delusional. You're crazy.
Hmm.
I started keeping a notebook, just date, time. This is what he said. This is what happened. Or if it was a text message or an email, I'd print it out. And I just kept a record, because I thought, if nothing else, if something happens to me, at least if somebody finds this, they'll
Mm.
know they'll know who it
That's
is.
smart.
So that was my documentation. And it's actually yeah, it was actually my documentation that ended up, when I was finally out of the relationship and divorced, and he finally moved off the property, that I developed it all into the book that I wrote, because I just felt it was really important, that other people know what this abuse looks like, because out in the world, and people that have known me all that time, I was at all my son's little school parties and baseball games with cupcakes and a smile, and, cooking hot dogs for birthdays. And you would have never known. I put on a
Yeah.
face. I would have
Well,
never let on, because if I had let on that there was abuse going on at home, I would have been in for it. So
yeah.
we
Well,
put on a big face, and nobody knows this stuff's happening.
Well, like I said, I am so grateful that you're here. I am grateful that you're speaking out. Please tell us a little bit about the book. For those who we can't go into everything, so what the show has given you is some highlights to the book. So tell us a little bit more about the book,
Yes,
and then tell us where we can get the book from, and where we can, if we want to reach out to you, if someone needs, if they just need to talk to you, because
absolutely.
sometimes all you need is one person that's been in your shoes to talk to help you to make the right decision. So just tell us about a little bit about the book and where we can find it, and also where we can find you on social media,
Absolutely.
because
Thank you for letting
it's
me do that. Yes, ma'am. Yes, that's the place to be now. The book is called Gasping for Air: The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse by Dana S. Diaz. It's available on Amazon. You can get a
okay.
print book or an ebook. Either way, I've had 3 book signings so far in 3 different states, and I'm still going to make my way around the rest of this year. So if anyone wants to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, I do promote those events on there as well. And I am going to be on various podcasts that I'll be promoting. So if anyone wants to find me, Dana S. Diaz, author, on Facebook, Instagram, and also on TikTok. And again, the book is called Gasping for Air.
Okay. And I will make sure I have all of that in the notes, so that if anyone's out there that needs to reach out to you, please do so. I mean,
Yes.
do not suffer in silence. If, just like Dana said, if you don't feel safe or anything, at least start to put something in place like she did. She started to journal, write it down, have some evidence or something like that. So again, I've never been in that situation. I am grateful. I've been in other situations, but I've not been in that one. But this is a great resource. Reading her book, just following her, just so that you have a resource. So please, if you're out there, please connect with her and get help. So Dana, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. Again, I'm grateful that you are here,
Thank you.
and you're showing that although you went through hell, that you survived, and you're here to
Yes.
help someone else. So thank you.
Thank you so much.